episode 179 Above Ground Podcast.
My anchor.
Disclaimer, the hosts of this podcast, Will Foley and TPP, are not medical professionals, and this is not medical advice. Both Will and TPP have first-hand experience with mental illness. They have their own perspective and own thoughts on mental health challenges. Above Ground Podcast was birthed to help those who struggle with their mental health through honest dialogue. By speaking openly and sharing tools, they foster connection. By fostering connection, they convey hope. With connection and hope, we can continue to increase awareness. These conversations aim to break down the walls while building stronger foundations for positive mental health. This is Above Ground Podcast.
Coming at you live with real conversations about mental health from the perspective. It's time for Above Ground Podcast. Now your hosts, TPP and Will Foley. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Above Ground Podcast.
Above Ground Podcast, because you can't serve below.
No, you cannot. You know who that is. You down with TPP.
Yes. Yes, you know me.
Yeah, Timmy. What's up, buddy?
Oh, not much.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, wait, there's a lot
Yeah,
up.
there's a lot up.
But if you have an anchor tied to it, that stuff doesn't always come up, does it?
No, you're right.
But if you release that anchor, sometimes that shit just goes right out to sea. Woo! Right out with the tide.
So we want to release that anchor, right?
I guess we got to release an anchor, man. I guess we got to pull it up. The good thing about an anchor, anchors mean a lot to me. I have an anchor tattooed on my right wrist. I have an affinity for the ocean, and anchors are the perfect symbol of what yin and yang really represents to me. Because an anchor, it can be a good thing because it can hold you in bay. It can keep you from being swept out to the ocean. It can keep your boat in place. It can keep you where you want to be. However, it also has the opposite effect. And sometimes those anchors can hold you in place in a place that you are no longer welcome or want to be. And
yeah, that's awesome, man. I got to say, I never thought of it that way at all. When you said it, and I was like, that's pretty spot on. I mean, it's a good way to look at it. I mean,
yeah, the whole representation of the chain being broke on this to me is that chain breaking and you pulling up that anchor and saying, "Okay, I gotta."
So maybe it's not necessarily getting rid of the anchor, but having control of the anchor, being able to put it down when you want to put it down.
Yes,
and pick it up when you want to pick it up.
Yeah, I think that could be part of it, and I think it's also identifying with the anchor. And being the anchor itself too, because we can identify with our issues, we can identify with our positives. So it's that identity and what we view as and how we view it as.
Right.
Because again, and the anchor thing's only really come to me over the last few years, as some anchors are being pulled up in front of me right now, and I'm being forced to move my ship other places. It's brought up a lot of my insecurities again.
Brings up all that seaweed and
it does, man. You start pulling up, you start winding that chain in, and that anchor starts pulling up, and you're going to bring up
especially
everything.
If that anchor's been there a while, right? I mean, it's
well, shit, dude. If that anchor's been in the ocean for a number of years or hours or whatever, again, you get the sea life that floats around it. Then you get the seaweed that grows over it. You get all the plastic that people throw into the ocean and pollute with. You get all this shit.
Fish poop.
You get all this stuff.
I had to make
fish
some
poop,
light,
of course. You get all these things that come around the anchor, and who knows, if you're in Jaws 2, you may be winding stuff up, and you may pull up the entire power supply of an island with that. You know what I mean? But that means you got to release it and let it go so it goes back down and then free it up. But so here's a question for you, though. When is it time to pull up an anchor?
I was just thinking that as you did it, and I was going to ask you the same thing.
When's the time, man? Do you know it's time?
I don't know. I don't know if I have a really definitive answer. I think that maybe you don't know it's time, but when you do attempt to raise the anchor, maybe you'll find out if it is time or not. Maybe you find out during the process of that. You know, a couple of weeks ago, you were on that real-time kick, and I think that may fall into this category, like real-time. Like you sometimes I think sometimes you have to do it. Sometimes you have to reel it up and go, you know what, I'm going to take that risk, because right now with the anchor down and locked in, I'm not, I'm kind of stuck. I feel like the anchor's holding me back. So if you take that risk and bring up the anchor, maybe you'll find out, like, you know what, I just had a lot of weeds and some rusting going on. Maybe needed to tighten the chain around, whatever. And you need to do a little routine maintenance on the anchor, and then maybe you can put it down. Or maybe you'll find out, you know what, it's time to move the anchor.
Yeah, it might be time to move the ship.
Might be time to move the
boat, man. I'm struggling with this now because sometimes, well, in my life, a lot of the change that's happened in my life has been forced upon me. When I think about the stuff that's really, really taken pieces of me, it's been forced upon me. And this is another case of it being semi-forced upon me. Sometimes you can see the sunset for what it is, but that doesn't mean that you're willing to not face another day. But you know what? If the sunset isn't willing to face another day and it's a cloudy day and it chooses to stay in, there's nothing you can do about that. So that means you got to pull up your anchor and move to a sunnier shore.
There you go.
And
that's a good way to look at it, though, for real. Like that's a good way to look at it. I mean, just because right now there may be raging waters and electric eels circling your boat.
Dude, fucking great white sharks.
Fucking great white sharks.
Oh, yeah. No, this isn't like, we're not talking about more eels fucking getting through a wetsuit, man. We're talking about Bruce. We're talking about chomping down like he's Quint, like I'm Quint.
Yeah. So maybe it's time to face that great white shark.
Yeah, it is. And you know what? We don't always have the choice. We don't always make the choice. The choice is sometimes made for us.
Right.
And as we know, because we've talked about Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey isn't something you choose that you're going to take part in the hero's journey, but the idea of the hero's journey is it's placed in front of you. And if you do not take part in it, you can deny it, but something else is going to come. And that's always going to be there. It's always going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a decision on my new year at the beginning of 2022 that I ask Unity, the universe, to show me whatever it needs to show me now, because it needs to get fixed, because I can't take any more of the status quo as it is all the time. And unfortunately, when you ask for things like that, you don't always like the answers. And sometimes the answers are very hard to face. And you have to face your responsibility in it. And you have to face the fact that it's not always your choice. And it's not always about you. And you have to be humble enough to accept that, yes, I may be part of the problem, but I'm not all the problem.
And I think another way to say some of what you're saying is the messages and that we get, or the remedies that we seek out, don't always play out obviously the way we want them. Like the message, we ask for something and it may be a message or a lesson that we dread, but that's what we have to deal with, because we will, like Will said, he was open and he showed universe willingness to say, I'm ready for kind of this lesson. Like I've kind of had it, and whatever it is, I'm open to. And what I'm trying to say is, like, being open to that lesson isn't always going to be, the bridge over the moat, and there's the steed on the other side, waiting to help you cross the bridge. It could be that there is no bridge.
No, there's no bridge.
So
there's no bridge. There's no moat.
So at that time, the lesson could be like, now it's in your hands. Like, you have the power to build that bridge. You have the power to decide how you're going to get across the moat.
Well, you have the power to decide where your boat is going to stay
Where
docked.
your boat's going to, yeah.
And that anchor, you can keep it in the same bay, or you can, or, in the case of what just happened recently in Florida and up the East Coast with the hurricane, something catastrophic can come and it can yank your anchor right out of the ground and put your boat 100 miles upstream. So again, you have no control over that. It's how you respond to that at the end. And you could be mad at the weather for doing that, but then you have to take a step back and be like, okay, well, how did I add into this? Well, I know by being in this climate and being here that there's always the chance that something like this could happen. Or you could have said, well, I know it's coming and they're saying it's coming in a week, so maybe I can get my boat someplace else.
I think what you said a second ago is kind of originally where, like, I kind of wanted to direct through this episode is basically adding more weight onto an already heavy situation. Carrying around multiple anchors, dragging multiple anchors up. So, as Will said, it's like more of the thoughts and the judgments on what it is that's happening. Like, yeah, there was a terrible catastrophe and we got hit with a hurricane or whatever it may be. And instead of, kind of sitting there and ruminating and going, I wish this didn't happen. And it's whatever thoughts that are coming in have the ability to make it worse. But your thoughts can also have the ability to make it a little better as well. So the weight is going to be there. The storm is going to hit. So it's not necessarily, I personally feel that the energy spent is not necessarily worrying about the storm, but the energy is better spent knowing that the storm is going to come one day. You don't know when or where or why, but there will be a storm. But the energy put into knowing that you will be okay after the storm passes is where you should focus your energy.
Yeah, I agree, but it's awfully hard to do.
Oh, yeah, dude, I know it is. I'm just,
It's especially, here we go.
I don't want
real time here.
I don't want to be super doom and gloom.
That's been my catchphrase for the last
real time
sessions. Real time. But it's true, because a lot of this stuff we can talk about, but unless you are literally putting your feet to the fire, you cannot actually practice this stuff, because it's not something, again, that you can always practice in your bedroom. Sure, you can dissect yourself.
Sure.
And dissect your emotions and say, okay, why do I feel this way about this particular thing? Because it is all about asking better questions of yourself. And is this true? Is this emotion that I'm feeling accurate? Am I really feeling this? Or is it maybe this? Or and are you willing to see the answer for what it is? And are you willing to accept that anchor may not be in the best place that you could put it?
Yeah.
But seeing that when you're in the throes of the storm is the key. And it's very hard to do that. And only Jedis can do that.
Jedi.
And I'm nowhere close to that. I'm still a Padawan as far as I'm concerned.
But you know what? But you're starting. You have to start.
Oh, I started a long time ago, just like you did.
Right. Yeah, but you know what? Like, we're not where we were a long time ago.
Oh, hell no, we're not.
Right. We started off going, geez, I wish I could hold that lightsaber. And now it's like, okay.
We hold the lightsaber.
We've held it a few times. We may not be able to wield it the way that we want, but we're learning.
We are learning.
We may not be able to move something from, by the force, with our mind, but we're learning and we're in the process. We may be in Dagobah still.
Yeah, we're in Dagobah still trying to get up the X-Wing fighter and still
Yeah.
getting frustrated. We're still fighting ourselves in the system, man. We're still walking through the brush and the mud and the snakes, and we're still seeing ourselves in that head that we cut off. Because because in truth, our greatest battle is ourselves. Because that's what everybody talks when everybody talks about. We talk about it in Ho'oponopono, which is that Hawaiian prayer about forgiveness. But it's about forgiveness of yourself for being part of the judgment, being part of the thought, being part of the collective of the whole. And by forgiving yourself of the situation, we don't like to take responsibility. And I get it. And I know why we don't like to take responsibility, because we're not willing to take responsibility, because we're not willing to do the work that it takes to actually respond and not react. Now, yes, we are coming to do that now. And so many of us out here are learning, and some of us are further ahead in our studies than others. But that's why we're here to bring up everybody else in the background, because we've learned something and we need to pass it on.
Will's dropping some knowledge. Get out your pens. Listen up. No, I mean, I there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. I agree with a lot of it, and I think those are valid ways to look at things, valid ways to kind of to be, if I should say that in that way. It like Will said, it's unless you're in the fire, you don't necessarily know how much heat you can take or how you're going to handle it.
Right. You can try out the hose to make sure it works, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to wield that hose to put out the fire, because that's all about technique.
And have the strength to get to that hose.
That's right. And have the strength to get to that hose and wield that hose.
There's lots of variables. We know this, but it's just there's so many variables to this. It's not just one thing. Everything's interconnected, and if the day that you need to you plan on moving the ship and picking up that anchor, maybe the night before you had a really bad night and you didn't sleep and you were ruminating a lot. That's going to be a variable in this. That's going to affect your performance on moving the ship the next day.
Absolutely. It's going to affect whether or not you even want to pull up the anchor to move the ship.
That's perfectly fair.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do know what you mean. I think it's being aware of the situation and being aware of our thoughts and feelings and not adding on to what already is.
What are some ways that you found that you've added on to the weight of your anchor? Is it negative self-talk? Is it negative belief?
Check. Yeah, I think a lot of it is rumination, is ruminating on the things. What I think I tend to do most, again, for me, I brought that last bit up because it pertains to me. If I have a lot of stuff going on, it's a little bit harder to have the strength and to have the resilience, because I'm using, if I have 4 spoons, and something else comes up where I need a spoon, but I don't have that spoon for that thing. I'm like, I'm out of life preservers, I'm out of life jackets. The boat only has 3 life jackets on it, and they're being used. So,
Be Quint, he didn't want a life jacket. He said he never put a life jacket on again.
Well, there you go. You can do that. But
sorry, summer's over and I'm still in my jaws.
No, I think from I take past situations and maybe hold on to them. I get stuck in them, and I'm like, what? The way I look at things is, and this may be unhelpful, but the way I look at some things is, if I cooked a steak on this stove and 3 times, and each time that I cooked that steak on that stove, I got burnt or a fire went off. So the 4th time I go to that stove with a steak, I'm going to be awfully careful and hesitant to even attempt to do it.
But are you going to attempt to do it?
That's the question.
And I suppose that is the conundrum that we all face. Are you going to be able to stand in the fire the 4th time, 5th time? Now, we're talking about anchors, so we're talking about the ocean. And one of the toughest things in the ocean is the ocean predators, right? You have to have shark skin nowadays, because shark skin is actually some of the toughest skin that you can ever touch. And everyone that's ever said that they've had a close encounter with a shark and have tried to punch it, it's literally cut their hands open.
Punch it.
And punch it. What? Why was that funny?
I don't know. Go ahead. I'm sorry. You're right, though, because I think you're supposed to poke the shark in the eye.
Yeah, good luck trying to get to the eye.
I'm just saying, like, that's a way to, kind of get them off of you if they're gnawing on your leg, you know?
Yeah, because if they're gnawing on your leg, you're going to think about their eye.
I know, right?
You're going to think about your leg.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know why. It was just funny when you used to punch. I'm just picturing Will punching a shark right now. I think that's what did it for me.
Probably. And I think it would be pretty funny.
Which, it could be. It could be a little bit of a distraction to kind of help you gain your wits and move forward with it. Give you that second to breathe and to think. Hey, I'm getting gnawed on here. What's my next move?
Yeah. I don't know if you're thinking of a next move when you're getting gnawed on.
Probably not. No.
We do, though, when we set course. And that's really what this, for me, about pulling up anchors is about setting a course. And when you set a course, that means you actually have to make a plan. And I had not realized in my life how much I've never had a plan about anything. I've kind of gone about it
without a map.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about flying without a net all the time, right? Yeah,
well,
but without a map, you can have a course in your mind and think you know the map, but without a plotted course to say, hey, don't go over there because they're fixing those sets of exits, so you can't get off that part. You can't go into that dock because they're fixing those docks over there. You got to go to the next port, where the next port is another couple miles up to sea. And if you're on the ocean, to be honest with you, if you were to look around and not see any land, everything would just look the same.
Right.
Nothing. So you would be so disoriented that you wouldn't know where to end up. And
so maybe if we have the time and knowledge in that moment to make a list, to make a list and with steps to lift up your anchor and relocate your ship, maybe jot down some notes.
Even if it's not even if it's just a thing to say, okay, I'm going to move the anchor, and all I want to do is I want to get to this point. I don't know how to get there, but I will figure it out. And then you can sit down and set the course to Google, to Google your map and quest it out. I think
it just reminds. Just that what you just said, that reminded me of something that somebody said about me once, which I would have never thought this about myself, but it was really cool. That's probably why I remembered it. But they said that you seem to jump without a plan, but always land on your feet.
That's actually a really good compliment.
Yeah, that's why I was like, yeah, holy cow, that's why I remembered it. I'm like, that was a pretty cool compliment for sure.
You sound like a cat, something you don't like.
Right. Maybe a cat.
Which you may have been a cat in another life.
Right. That's probably why I don't like it, because a lifetime of sniffing other cats' butts, you tend to get a little tired.
I don't see many cats sniffing many other cats' butts.
Well, maybe it was just me. All right.
So that might be why. That might be why you don't want to be a cat, because you don't want to sniff butts.
I am done sniffing butts in this life.
When it comes to being the skipper of your own path,
The captain of your own ship.
The captain of your own ship, man. That's like all these cliches. Like,
I know.
We're
they're
taught.
real. I mean,
we're taught to talk in metaphor, and when it comes to therapeutic ways to talk to people, a lot of people understand metaphor, and I happen to be fairly adept at metaphors in a lot of ways, and it makes it easier. And the metaphor of the anchor is, to me, really, really personal. And I don't know why that is. I think it stems from familial stuff. I was given an anchor necklace when I was a young kid from my grandmother. Yeah, and I hadn't even thought about this for a long time until after I got this tattoo, and I'm like, what is it?
That was the grandma that kind of raised you, right?
No, this is my mom's mom, my grandma Rose, who is important for lots of reasons too. And she had given me this necklace, this gold necklace, and I didn't like the necklace because I'm not a gold person. I don't like gold. I like silver or white gold, but gold, the color gold just doesn't go with me. And but I always remembered that necklace, and I never could figure out what an anchor actually meant. I wasn't in the Navy or anything like that, but as my years have developed and I've realized that I'm really drawn to the ocean, and the ocean really does provide me with energy, and it's very spiritual and things. I realize that the anchor really does hold a lot of weight, literally and figuratively, for me, which is why I had it tattooed on me. And it's also a really good metaphor for the ups and the downs and the heaviness and being able to move on, man. And sometimes you just need somebody to tell you, you know what, man? You don't need to hold on to that anchor anymore. You need to let it go. It's time to let it go.
That's heavy.
It is heavy, man. The anchors
I agree.
are heavy.
I think, well, and I think I said this even early on, but like, even like the idea of talking about, an anchor, my anchor, or paint with an anchor, or whatever the anchor term to me just was always like something that, holds you back almost, like keeps you there. So it kind of, with this, I just see it as I'm looking at it through like almost my path within mental health is now I look at it and go, hey, wait a minute. Like, yeah, you know what? That anchor is kind of holding me back and keeping me right here, but I actually have the power to pick that anchor up and steer the ship in the direction that I choose.
And by discovering your personal power, it becomes empowerment. And that is the surest way to get somebody to see that they can be more, they are more, and they are worthy.
Yeah.
And they are, destined for good things. But that takes work, and that takes willingness, and it takes
all that stuff.
It takes a lot, man, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of energy.
It does, but I think, going back to I'm a firm believer of the one day at a time rule, one step at a time, whatever it is. As long as you said to yourself, you know what, I'm willing. I may not know entirely what this is going to come out as or what this process is going to entail, but I'm open to it right now. And right now, I'm just going to take a step forward.
Yeah, I'll leave you with this. We're getting on in the year. We're getting close to the end of the year, and a lot of people look at the new year as a new place to start. I don't go by the calendar new year because I I go by my birthday now because I don't like to celebrate birthdays. I celebrate New Year on my birthday. However, if you're celebrating New Year on the calendar flip, you have the chance to decide what anchors you're going to pull up and set someplace else. Make that decision for yourself. Find the strength to leave. Find the strength to grow. Find the strength to move your ship if you need to move it. And if you don't need to move it and it's right where you want it to be, then throw up your hands and say thank you and be done. Because that's where you need to be in the moment. So until next week, get well.
Be safe.
Stay above.
Thank you for giving us a listen. New episodes every Wednesday. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can share, rate, review, and even subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Other ways to support the show: follow us on social media, share the content, share our episodes. You can also buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/abovegroundpod. For further concerns, show ideas, or just to say hi, you can email us at abovegroundpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, thank you for listening and supporting mental health. Keep the conversation going and stay above.